I think we expect a wild, non-domestic apex predator to accept interaction with the paying public whenever we want and whatever we want. You know, people go into these interaction places, they only see the sort of 10 minutes they spend with either a lion or a tiger cub, but they don't see the often hundreds of people that go through that same petting enclosure every single hour of the day, 7 days a week, and they interact with those same animals. So like our domestic house cats, they get irritated and they sometimes lash out, but that can be with dire consequences. And when we look at the last 10 years or so of all the reported attacks by predators in captivity in South Africa, we know that this involved at least 40 people, and in 65% of those cases it involved tourists in interactive facilities. So, you know, it's really not without danger when we interact with these animals. You know, and these attacks are not just that people get injured. In about a quarter of the cases, these attacks are actually fatal. People die as a result of the sustained injuries. And these attacks involve adults, children, men, women. There's really no difference between them.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's really quite dangerous.
It also just does seem like a bit of an obsession. Why do people have this fixation with petting wild animals that are in captivity?
Yeah, again, a very good question. I don't think that one is very easy to answer, but in my personal opinion, I think social media plays an important role because many of these images obviously end up on platforms like Instagram, Facebook, and Snapchats. And I think also we have lost connection with nature, but we still feel a need to reestablish that connection. And then we go for the easy and guaranteed option of wildlife in captivity because we know we can get the right picture there and then. We know we can get really close and that will impress the people on social media. But in that process, we actually forget that we put our needs as people completely above the needs of the animals, and we forget about welfare issues associated with those interactions. Because as you were saying in your introduction, where are the mothers and where are these animals going to at the end of their interactive life? Because that is relatively short. And we know that these cubs are ripped from their mothers, often hours to days after birth. We know they're bottle fed on a formula that doesn't give them the nutritional value they need, that compromises their immune systems and leads to illness, disease, and even premature death. And we also know that these cubs are not going back to the wild. They're not being reintroduced in the wild. The vast majority end up in captive or canned hunts. They are exported live to go to zoos or breeding facilities overseas, or they're being killed for their bones and exported to Southeast Asia, where their bones are often used for traditional Chinese medicine. At best, a cub may become a breeding machine themselves. That closes the life cycle of that cub. And I think that is what people completely forget.
Yeah, these are all very sad scenarios. So animal welfare organizations are calling for an end to the captive lion breeding industry. How will this help preserve the lions?
Well, obviously, we believe that the captive population actually helps the wild population, but it's just not the case. The wild population just needs safe habitat. They need plenty of prey species. And we just know also that by exporting legally, for example, lion bones, that so we allow the legal market for body parts, we allow parallel illegal markets to exist as well. So we already know that there are more and more wild lions being poached for their body parts as well. So it's actually the opposite is starting to become clear that instead of helping the lions in the wild, it's actually threatening conservation of lions in Africa, but even the tiger conservation efforts in Asia as well. And this comes obviously at a time when we know that continent-wide populations of lions are going down dramatically. So, yeah.
Louise, are there enough regulations, enforcement, controls, as well as even just standards in the captive lion breeding industry?
Well, I think that is also always a very interesting question. But when we talk about regulation and enforcement controls of a commercial captive breeding industry, we actually assume the acceptability of the commodification of wildlife in the first place. And this debate is often bypassed. But if we look at this industry, we know it's been allowed to grow unregulated with very inadequate enforcement. Inspections, for example, in 2016 and 17 of lion facilities by the then Department of Environmental Affairs and the provincial EMIs showed numerous non-compliances with both the threatened or protected species regulations and permit conditions. And in most of those cases, the invalid permits were renewed without further sanction. Also, we are in this position that since 2016, many calls have been made for the development of national norms and standards for the breeding and keeping of predators in captivity for commercial purposes. And that issue is still not fully addressed, and it straddles between the mandates of the Department of Environment, Department of Agriculture, and the provincial authorities, meaning that none of the departments currently take full accountability. Now, in the absence of those norms and standards, the lion breeding industry itself is pushing for self-regulation. And that is a very dangerous one, because membership-based norms and standards can only ever be voluntary, and also there's only a small percentage of those breeders, those lion facilities, members of professional associations.
All right, thank you very much, Louise, for raising such very important topics and facts. That was Louise de Waal from Blood Lions Campaign.